Room 313 doesn't exist. That's what you'll be told. That's what I used to say at the front desk with a smile you could hang a key off of. But every night at 3:13 a.m., someone still calls from it. I was the night auditor at the Harrowby, a century-old hotel that wore its age like perfume, cigarettiolo chandeliers, brass that would never stop being a little green, carpet patterned like static. The day staff called the Harrowby historic. The night crew called it honest. We only ever saw people as they were at 2 in the morning, unvarnished, tired, and looking for a place to be a person no one knew. I'd taken the job because numbers make sense when people don't. Room folios add up or they don't. Receipts either match the drawer or they don't. Night shifts meant quiet, and I thought quiet meant harmless. That first week, the manager, Miss Cho, handed me the leather-bound register we kept for show tourists, liked to sign it with the fountain pen and feel like tycoons. It looked like a prop, cracked spine, corners darkened with a century of hands. What no one told me until later was that we also wrote certain things in it that never went into the computer. It started with a call. Front desk, I said. Eyes on the audit sheet. This is Alex Men's voice, flat as cold coffee. Wake-up call for 3:13. What room? Silence. Then the soft burr of an old wire line. I glanced at the console. No room number displayed, just house. I almost said, "Sir." When the line clicked, dead. Miss Cho was doing her last sweep before heading home. I told her. She said, "House calls sometimes glitch. Don't worry about it," and pointed at the binder. "Remember, any guest complaint, anything unusual, write it in the register." The Harrowby likes to keep its stories straight. I wrote, "House call, wake-up request, 3:13" in tidy accountant letters. It felt like filing a dream. At 3:12 that night, as if the building could read a clock. The house phone on the back wall rang. It was an antique rotary whose bell sounded like a jar lid dropping on tile. The console screens didn't light. The line from the wall to the phone looked newer than the phone itself, as if someone had stitched a vein to a fossil. I picked up and said, "Front desk." "Thank you," the man said. A pause, as if he were listening for footsteps. "We'll be ready to check out." "Sir, what room?" A click. The dial tone came back. And it wasn't the steady hotel tone, but the fragile, breathy one my grandmother's phone used to have. A sound like someone trying to keep a secret from you. I didn't tell Miss Cho that part. I wrote house phone 312, thanked for wake up and turned the page. You can rationalize anything at 4 in the morning. That is the hour when the brain will stitch any two facts together to keep from going mad. On my third night, a couple arrived at 2:40 a.m., the hour for fights and reconciliations. They looked too neat for either. She with a silk scarf knotted too tight against the cold. He with hair combed to a part that had learned fear, both carrying small overnight cases, like obedient dogs. "We need a room," the man said. He smiled with the careful half-moon of people who've practiced it in mirrors. His accent was nowhere and everywhere. A radio host who had learned to erase edges. "We have queens," I said, tapping keys. "Twins, a junior suite, if you 313, he said. I looked up. "We don't have a 313. The woman unknotted her scarf. She was beautiful in the way a painting is beautiful 3 rooms away. "Of course you do," she said softly, as if embarrassed for me. "We've stayed before. The key is brass. Older than the others. It sticks a little." I laughed without consent. "We skipped 13 on the floors, 12, then 14. Superstitions. Then why do you get calls from it?" the man asked. I glanced at the house phone. I felt a childish urge to put my hand over its mouthpiece, like covering a cat's eyes so it couldn't see you. "Room 312 is open," I said, and held up the key card like a shield. They took it. The woman's fingers brushed mine. They were cool and dry, like paper leaves. "If 13 bothers you," she said, "call it something else. But it always knows its name." I watched them cross the lobby and disappear into the elevator. The doors hesitated before closing, as if deciding whether it was a good idea. then kissed shut. When the elevator reached 12, it kept going. The little red LED skipped 13 the way it was meant to, 12 to 14 in a blink, but the car did not stop. I heard it settle, heavy as a held breath. The panel above the desk, the one only star fuse hit. Behind the 14, a faint line appeared where no light should be, as if the number had tried to birth a shadow. I went to the service stairwell. The metal door was cold. Every step up felt like walking into thinner air. The landing between 12 and 14 was just a square of concrete and a blank painted wall where, on any honest blueprint, a hallway would be. Someone had put a potted palm there that had never been alive. Dust lay on its leaves like frost. "Don't," a voice said below me. The night porter, Louise, leaned on his broom. "You don't open that door between 12 and 14. He said, "Even if someone knocks, especially then." "There isn't a door," I said. Even as I said it, I realized the blank wall had a seam, and the seam had a skin of paint 6 coats thick. Luis tapped his broom against the concrete, where a fainted set of numbers had once been stenciled, before someone scraped them away. I could make out 13 like a bruise under makeup. "There used to be," he said. I slept badly the day after. When I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the elevator panel light up, not 14 but 13 in a red too dim to be seen by the living. When I went in that night, Miss Cho was waiting. The register opened like a mouth. "Did you put these names in?" she asked, fingertip tapping neat entries on last night's page. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashburn, room 312. Late check-in, no incidents. Double quotes. "Yes," I said. "A couple. Married, I think." "Funny," she said. "We didn't have a charge for 312. Housekeeping says the bed wasn't slept in. No towels missing. No water." She looked up, something difficult passing like a cloud over her expression. "You're certain they were real? What else would they be?" She shut the register with a soft, frank sound that made me think of a book snapping shut on a fly. "There are stories," she said. "Every old hotel has them. The Heriby has more than most. We don't feed them. We don't starve them either. We keep accounts." I wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, I asked, if there was a 13th floor once, what happened to it? An accountant question. She said, "Good." An accountant answer. It was written off that night. The house phone rang at 3:12. "We'll be ready to check out," said the flat voice. I said nothing. I left the desk and walked to the service stairs like you walk to someone calling your name in a dark park against your own advice. Against the advice your mother gave you when you were 12. The blank wall on the half landing no longer looked blank. It looked patient. When I laid my palm against the seam, the paint felt warm from the other side, as if a hallway full of summer air pressed there. I think that's what made me do it. Warmth in the dead hours promises kindness. The panel opened like a book. No squeal of long-shot hinges, no smell of rot. Just a corridor lined with papered walls and lights, encased in frosted glass, that gave off a yellow like old teeth. The carpet had the same static pattern as the rest of the hotel, but the pile was thicker underfoot, the way carpet is before 1,000 suitcases cut paths through it. At the far end, a door hung with the brass number 313 stood ajar. I should have closed the panel and gone back to my desk. I should have called Miss Cho. I should have woken Louise and made a joke of it until the sun made everything smaller. Instead, I stepped into the hallway. The door closed gently behind me, with the tact of someone letting you make your own mistake. The air had a smell I couldn't place at first, the metallic sweetness of coins warmed in a palm. "Blood," my mind said, helpfully. Then I heard murmurs, far off and close by at the same time. Not words. The kind of sound registers make when you flip them fast and paper whispers to itself. Room 313's key was in the lock. It was brass and cold. When I turned it, the tumblers worked with a precision that made me imagine the smith who had cut them was stubborn about craft. Inside, the room was not a room. It was an apology. Everything was a little nicer than the rest of the hotel. The bedspread, proper heavy damask, not synthetic. The curtains lined the lampshades clean. On the desk sat a small leather case and a man's hat with dimples in the crown, as if someone had taken it off thoughtfully and put it down only to pick it up again in a second. It might have been waiting there since the year people wore hats like that, or it might have arrived an hour ago. When I touched the brim, the felt was warm. "We were expecting you," a woman said. She stood by the window, looking out at a view only 13th floors have. Other roofs with their secrets. A slice of river that looks like metal in moonlight. A city that feels honest, because night won't let it lie. Her scarf was off. Her hair was pinned up carelessly, in the manner of people who once had maids. "Alex," I said, as if names are life preservers. "Lydia," she said, with the soft-voiced pleasure of someone being honest at last. "This is Oliver." The man stepped from the bathroom, drying his hands on a towel he had not wet. "Thank you for the wake-up." "I didn't," I began. And then, because accounting had taught me that sometimes the only way to make numbers add up is to accept the premise, of course. Oliver smiled the mirror smile again. "We've been trying to check out for years," he said. "No one ever comes to the desk this late." "House rules," Lydia said, half amused. "It's always house rules with the living." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "The register," Oliver said. "You have it, don't you?" "We can't sign the modern thing. It must balance." "I left it at the desk." "You didn't," Lydia said gently. "You brought it. You always do." I looked down and found the leather-bound register under my arm, weightless and heavy, like a sleeping cat you don't remember picking up. I opened it, meaning to prove something to myself, and found the page open to a date, in a hand I recognized as mine, January 13th. Of course it would be, and beneath, a list of names written not in my black accountant pen, but in faded brown, as if written by T. Oliver Ashburn, Lydia Ashburn, Genevieve Pike, Mr. and Mrs. Leland, Isaac Brown. Names kept going, neat as stitches. "Those are the ones who checked in," Oliver said softly. "The night of the fire." The room felt smaller. "There was a fire in 1913, Lydia said. "A good year for curses." She touched the curtains, as if they might ignite. They barred the stairwell to keep the drunks from wandering. The elevator failed. The manager, what was his name? "Oliver Caro," he said. "Mr. Amos Caro." He had a ledger, too, and he believed in balance. He believed if he never wrote "checked out" beside a name, the room stayed occupied, and the hotel would never have a vacancy. Vacancies looked bad on paper. He was an accountant of souls. "Many of us died here," Lydia said matter-of-factly, as if commenting on weather. "Most of us didn't know it for a while. We knocked, but the door had been written off." I ran my thumb down the margin. Next to each name, the column for departure was blank, a polite infinity of white. "What happens if I write it?" I asked. "If I mark you as checked out?" Oliver looked relieved enough to be cruel. "Then we can leave, and what happens to me?" Lydia met my eyes with the kindness people keep for news that cannot be softened. "Someone must balance the night," she said. "It is a ledger." "Is that why you called?" I asked, voice scraping. "You called us," Oliver said. "You opened the door. You brought the book. House rules." It felt like a trick in a children's game that had been played so long it turned into law. "What if I don't?" I asked. "What if I close the book and walk away?" "Then it circles back," Lydia said. "Eventually." She nodded at the phone on the nightstand, old bakelite thing, whose cord disappeared into the wall like a vein. We call until someone answers." I thought of Louis and his broom, of Miss Cho closing the register on the names that weren't charges, of the elevator settling where it had no right to settle. I thought of the other names on the page, the ones with no faces attached because I hadn't seen them yet. "Can you feel anything?" I asked. "Where you are?" Lydia considered. "The way a photograph might feel the light it no longer reflects. The way a note held too long on a violin is more pressure than sound." Oliver, impatient with poetry, said, "We feel the hour. We feel the door. We feel your hesitation like a draft." "Tell me something true," I said to Lydia. Oliver lies when he's desperate, she said, without cruelty. And you are kind when you're tired. And if you sign our names out, the hotel will keep you the way a drawer keeps receipts, until the taxman asks. I laughed then, the kind of laugh that's admission, not amusement. My hand moved before I consented. I wrote departed beside Oliver Ashburn and Lydia Ashburn in ink that looked like mine and the registers at once. The letters soaked in slowly, like blood back into a wound. The temperature changed, not colder, emptier. Lydia's scarf moved, as if a wind had found it. She touched Oliver's hand. Do you hear it? She asked. He nodded. Finally, they didn't say goodbye. They didn't thank me. A good exit requires no ceremony. They simply turned toward the door, as if that had always been where the room flowed. And for an instant I could see through them in the way you can see through a flame, to the thing it's changing. Then they were gone, and the door was only a door that opened on a hallway that led to the service landing, that returned to a hotel that pretended it had never had a 13th floor. I stayed. Someone had to turn the page. After that, the nights took on a shape. I would audit, answer the permissible calls, pour coffee that tasted the same whether it was new or old. Then, at 3:12, the house phone would ring, and at 3:13 I would open the door. Sometimes there were two. Sometimes a family held hands so tightly that when I wrote the mother's name first, the father flinched as if I had cut her out of something. Once a man named Isaac Brown insisted on signing his own name before I wrote departed beside it. His handwriting was so neat and so alive that for a second I thought, perhaps this is not death, but practice. Once I found a child sitting cross-legged on the bed, swinging her legs and inventing a song about the pattern in the carpet. Her mother stood in the bathroom doorway, hands folded around a hotel washcloth she had ruined with her teeth. We'd bring anything? The mother asked. I said, no, and meant, I don't know. What happens after? The mother asked. Most do, I heard myself say. Some take a later one. It was the phrasing the bus driver had used in a different story of mine, and it made me shiver to hear how icily my mouth could be taught by a house. When I wrote, departed beside their names, the child stopped singing on a note the room absorbed, like a held breath finally let go. Miss Cho noticed I was thinner. Louise began leaving tea by the register, the way a sailor leaves bread for a sea god he doesn't quite believe in. I told no one. You can't tell something like this without sounding like you're recruiting. On the 12th night the register's blank column had more ink than white. The names left belonged to people who'd been last to check in that evening in 1913. One of them was Amos Caro. He waited in 313 in a chair placed so he faced the door, a posture that could be hospitality or siege. He looked like someone from a sepia photograph rescued from an attic, the kind that surprises you with how well you can see the person in the blur. His suit was tidy, his expression reasonable, his hands clean. His ledger sat on the desk, twins, mine and his, both open 2 pages that argued with each other. You're the clerk, he said. You're the manager. I kept a good house, he said, as if headed off an accusation. The Heroby was discreet. We did not advertise scandal. Guests trusted us to contain their lives and their deaths, I said. He glanced at the register. If you write me out, he said, the balance will not be kept. Someone must sit here at 3:13. Already doing that, as a guest, he said, not as the house. He gestured. On his ledger, the departure column had neat diagonal marks. They weren't names. They were ticks, placeholders, the way a child pretends to write. You keep the column honest, he said, not unkind. I kept the rooms full. Vacancy is a kind of death for a hotel. It starts at a number, then gets into the walls, then into the staff. You must have rooms occupied. You must, at the price of people, at the price of paper, he said. Do you know what the city does to a house with vacancies? It calls it old. It renovates it into something that looks like the memory of itself. It kills it with brightness. He smiled, small and rueful. Every keeper bargains. I bargained, with the night I thought would pass. You barred the stair. I kept drunks from tumbling, he said. I kept the police from asking questions. The walls didn't want to answer. I did not set the fire. I only failed to imagine how quickly a night burns. He stood. If you write me out, the house will ask you for a name. It likes yours. It fits in the mouth. Alex, it has an X in it. Ledgers like straight lines and crosses. What if I write departed beside my own name? I said, and felt something inside me tilt, the way a picture tilts when a train goes by. He considered that like a move in a game. Then the house will call you from another room, he said. It always gets its call, answered. I looked down at my register. There is an arithmetic in all this. Names and hours, columns and columns. The only way to break an equation is to refuse to accept its operations. I took his ledger and mine, placed them side by side. For a childish second, I imagined I could trick them by writing my arrival over his departure, by binding the two columns into a knot no call could undo. But the book is patient. It has centuries for your cleverness to tire. Tell me the rule plainly, I said. No slight, no house phrasing. One name out, he said. One name in. I wrote, departed beside Amos Caro. The ink soaked in like a decision. He didn't vanish like the others. He smiled first, a small, private thing that could be gratitude or victory. And then he folded, not bodily but as a sound folds back into silence, the end of a bell. The last shiver of a glass after you stop running your finger around its rim. The roomside dot. The phone rang at the desk in the lobby outside 313. Not the bakelite one. The one I knew from years of working front desk. Modern, apologetic. The kind that says service when housekeeping needs towels. I let it ring. I put both ledgers under my arm and walked out to the landing. The door on the half landing stood open like a mouth. On the far side, the service stairs waited, cold as the right decision. The phone kept ringing. I went down to the lobby. The console screen said house 3:13 a.m. in politer little letters. I answered. Front desk, I said. Thank you, said the building, in a dozen borrowed voices. It sounded like Lydia and Oliver and the child's song and Miss Cho's careful speech. It sounded like the scrape of a key in a lock that doesn't resist. We'll be ready to check in. No, I said, and surprised myself with how steady it came out. We're closed for the night. The line clicked. The paneled wall hummed faintly, like a thing disappointed but patient. The hotel can wait better than any of us. It's business. Model is time. I put both ledgers on the counter and opened the register to a blank page. I wrote, in my neat accountant hand, house account, room 313 closed. Under it, in smaller letters, I hoped no one would notice. I wrote until the river changes course. It bought me 2 nights. On the third, a bus tour arrived late, so late it felt early 40 retirees with matching windbreakers and opinions about pillows. Chaos is good for hiding. I was folding folios when Miss Cho came in unexpectedly with a cup of tea and a look she reserved for numbers that misbehave. You look like you haven't slept, she said. I've been doing balances. Which ones? She touched the register, her fingertips gentle as if checking a fever. Alex, I know what the house can do. I know how it calls. I didn't hire you to be brave. I hired you because you're precise. Precision doesn't save houses. It keeps them honest. I wrote Caro out. I said. She absorbed that. Good. The house wants me. She nodded. It wants anyone who answers. But it prefers the ones who keep books. They understand why rules matter. What happens if I leave? I asked. Quit. She looked toward the service stairs, then back at me. Perhaps it circles back, she said. Eventually. Perhaps it finds someone, clumsier with a pen. A tour guest approached to complain about the view from 415, while I rekied her room. Miss Cho wrote something small in the register. When the woman left, I looked beside house account, room 313 closed. Miss Cho had added a date, 13 of the following year and a single line. Audit. What does that mean? I asked. It means we'll argue with the house once a year, she said. On its night, on our terms, we'll bring tea and names. We'll let as many out as we can before it notices what we're not letting in. She touched my hand. Go home and sleep. Bring a different kind of pen next time. What kind? One you bought for something joyful, she said. The house likes grief ink. I tried to do as she asked. I failed. The way you fail at sleep when you're listening for a sound you promised you wouldn't listen for. At 3:12, from my apartment across the river, I heard nothing. At 3:13, I dreamed the elevator arriving somewhere it wasn't built to go. In the dream, the light didn't skip 13. It lingered there, warm and patient. We held the first order to year to the night. Miss Cho had pastries from the bakery that survived everything. Louise wore a tie that tried to be brave. I brought a pen I had bought the day I thought I might ask someone to marry me, and never did. It felt, in my hand, like a small, honest weapon. 3:12. The house phone rang. At 3:13 we opened the door. The hallway waited like a patient mistake. 313 was full again, as houses refill, as ledgers do. We worked, we wrote, we listened. We argued with the rules the way you argue with rain, not expecting to win, only to get through the night mostly dry. I keep the register now in a drawer that sticks. I keep Caro's ledger under it, the way you keep a bad habit under your better self. Sometimes the house rings on nights that aren't the 13th. I don't answer. Mostly it stops. Sometimes it does not. On those nights, I write house call, no answer, and add a small tally in the margin. Not because it means anything to the house, but because it means something to me. Here is the part people want. The part my voice will make you believe, because human voices are magic tricks we perform on ourselves. If you find yourself at the Herobeat, and if you ride the elevator late enough that the panel hesitates between 12 and 14, and if you hear a phone ring from a room that does not exist, do not answer. Go down to the lobby. Sit where the night clerk can see you. Order tea. Ask for a story that ends. If the desk is empty and a leather register sits open like a patient mouth, if a pen lies beside it that looks like grief, close the book. If the door on the half landing is ajar, close that too. If you cannot close it, if warmth breathes from the seam and a voice says, "We'll be ready to check out," tell it gently. Most do. Some take a later one. And if you cannot say even that, fifth, the house has already learned your name, has already put its polite red light on the panel for a floor no one built. Then at least remember this. Write your own name last. Because balance is the oldest superstition. Because ledgers are only as powerful as the people who believe in them. Because a room that doesn't exist is still a room. If enough of us can point to the door, room 313 doesn't exist. That's what we tell guests. That's what I tell myself at 3:10, when the building is quiet enough to hear the river turn in its sleep. But at 3:13, the phone will ring again, and I will count the rings. And I will decide whether tonight is a night to argue with the house.